Mr. Ivey, for 5 minutes.
Thank you. There were some comments about law enforcement, and I guess the theory is that police departments across the country are having trouble hiring because of defund arguments and difficult environment and the like. We had another hearing in the same hearing room this morning, and the chief from I believe it was Odessa, Texas, came in, and consistent with what other members of law enforcement have said, the primary focus of what he talked about was pay. His point was, the area where he lives, they have oil and gas fields. You can start working for oil and gas, and a young individual can work his way up to making $100,000 in relatively short period of time. Whereas at the police department, he said that you have to be 21 to be hired, and so a lot of these young men take jobs right after high school, and so by the time they're old enough to be hired by the police, it's too late. They've already gone into other fields, and they pay a lot less than these young men can earn in the law enforcement profession. So he also noted that when somebody asked about defund the police, he pointed out that that was never an issue. Where he is just unrealistic. He said they had strong support from the community and the prosecutors. So, I do want to be careful about sort of trying to make this a unanimous point across the country. There are lots of places in the country where people are having trouble hiring police for the same reason people are having trouble hiring in other professions. It's sometimes it's the money, sometimes it's the nature of the work, but it's not because, not universally at least for sure, of some kind of defund the police movement. I did want to point out too, and we've talked a lot about defund the police, but my Republican colleagues are talking a lot about defunding the police, but they're the ones sponsoring legislation to not just defund the ATF, but eliminate it entirely. Not just to defund the FBI, but to eliminate it entirely. And the Republican frontrunner for president right now has called for the entire elimination of the Department of Justice and the FBI. So your former boss, I guess, Mr. Erickson. So, to the extent we really want to engage in those conversations, I think we should be careful about it. The people, again, on the panel from this morning, and the panel this morning was about reducing crime at the state and local level. And they, all across the board, all three of the law enforcement officials said, yeah, we have good partnerships with the feds. We work with them closely. The gentleman from Odessa, Texas, pointed out that he had a great working relationship with the assistant U.S. attorney, and I think he said the Western District of Texas. Now, this is the Biden Department of Justice, but it doesn't matter because at that level of what they're doing, they're able to work their cases together and fight crime in a coordinated way. They also noted that it was helpful to them for the federal funding that they're getting. I think they were talking about burn grants primarily, but there's $350 million that's been made available in many instances to smaller police departments like the ones in my jurisdiction. I have a county police department that has like 1,000 officers, but we have multiple municipal police departments that have like 10 officers on the department. And it's very valuable to have that kind of federal funding to help them with getting equipment and also, hiring. Some of them need bonuses to attract law enforcement and the like. So I think it's important for us to make sure that we're not missing the big point on these issues. And with respect to, again, this topic, and Ms. Gaines, I think your testimony, I think there's definitely a hearing waiting for you. I sit on the Judiciary Committee. That's probably where it should be because the issues you're raising tend to be addressed by those types of laws that fall in the jurisdiction of that committee. So maybe you'll pass that along to Mr. Jordan and he'll have a hearing to that effect. But to the other issues, I think it's pretty clear that, yes, it's clear that we have violent extremism in the United States. There are ideological roots for that we need to address. And I think that to some extent, it's on the left. It's sort of a different set of roots to those problems. But clearly the ones on the right we can tell what those issues are, and Ms. Petalnik has talked about those, and I think we need to try and address those quickly so we don't have other big major shootings, or we try and address them as quickly as we can. And I yield back.
I thank the ranking member for yielding back, and I'll recognize myself for 5 minutes and use it as the opportunity to say, I think the original event that inspired this hearing on left-wing violence was the Antifa attack on the police facility in development in Atlanta. And because for me, it was so out of nowhere, kind of. I mean, we've gotten accustomed to seeing this in certain parts of the country, but it's showing up other places. Maybe it's been my own narrow horizon. I haven't seen that it's been everywhere. But I noticed Mr. Goldman said earlier when he was here that it was I think he sort of denigrated what happened down there, saying charges range from something to assault. I don't remember what he said, but actually I turned around to staff because what I remembered and what staff then confirmed is that all 23 people arrested there were charged with domestic terrorism. They got domestic terror charges. That's a pretty big deal. That either means somebody's overcharging, or I think more likely, given the stuff that we saw, Molotov cocktails and stuff like that, this is crazy stuff. And again, I don't think, and I appreciate Mr. Ivey, some of the comments you've had, but the tenor, of course, a number of comments on the other side, people outraged that we're looking at this, and it can always question about whether it's worth a hearing or not, but it doesn't denigrate the idea, Mr. Crane, to your point, that there is this crazy white supremacy sort of motivated violence out there that has cost lives. I don't denigrate that in any respect. I do think it's problematic, with all due respect to Ms. Petalnik, to suggest that all conservatives are white supremacists. Hence, they're inspiring that. I mean, by the same token, everybody who is embraces trans ideology sponsored the woman or the person. I don't remember which one, frankly, who in Nashville killed a bunch of people. I don't think, in fact, this whole concept we've heard talked about in various hearings of stochastic terrorism. You heard that phrase? Stochastic terrorism, the idea that if you engage in very normal spectrum debate, advocacy for views, you're somehow inspiring some person down the road to engage in extremist violence. I think that's dangerous to the conception of our free speech and the way we. But let me go to you, Mr. Erickson, for just a second here. It seems to me this fundamental pillar of our democracy is the rule of law, and yet I see I think about, it's funny. The Trump administration has always taken the task. In fact, Trump himself is called a white supremacist by my colleagues on the other side, and yet they also say it was Trump's Department of Homeland Security that identified right-wing or white supremacist extremists as and I always got to formulate this right, as you say, it's the most lethal domestic terror threat to the homeland, I think is how they put it. But that doesn't ever get credited for some reason. But what do you see the long-term consequences if we can't even have a hearing to examine this type of violence and that, so that the country will be aware of the challenges we face?
Well, I mean, I think the long-term implications of a lack of candor in this topic could be very disastrous. I mean, our democracy is predicated upon us being able to discuss difficult issues and do so in a respectful way, acknowledging that there are two sides to a coin, or acknowledging that the spectrum of an issue can be broad and wide. And a lot of what I saw today was, folks mentioning one side of the violence. I think the point of this hearing, and I applaud the majority for doing this, is that we have to acknowledge all sides. And for the past couple of years, there's been scant conversation about left-wing violence coming at least from the federal government. Left-wing violence is not just vandalism. I was in Portland every single night, as Mr. Rosas alluded to. These domestic terrorists were not just destroying the Hatfield Federal Courthouse, but our federal law enforcement who were in the courthouse were literally attempted to light them on fire and to burn the building down with them in it. It was only at that time that they would leave the building to try and apprehend the people that were doing that. This was not vandalism. This goes far beyond that. So to simply say, well, 22 people died in 2022, and it was all because of right-wing extremism, and to say that means that left-wing extremism is not a problem, That's the problem. That's the problem here that we're facing right now in Congress. We have to talk about this holistically.
Would the gentleman yield for a question?
I've only got 10 seconds, but yes.
Quick question.
To him?
To you. This is your point about the domestic terrorism charges in Georgia. They were made under state law. There's no federal statute that is domestic terrorism. Would you consider working with me to put together a domestic terrorism bill that we could pass that would apply at the federal level on both sides and would focus primarily on the more serious crimes? Minor stuff could be left at the state level.
Yeah.
Would you be open to that?
Mr. Ivey, I would be willing